up, everyone? It's Russo, TGBSupplements.com collab. Today we're going to be going over on the casting couch, 4 deep in the casting couch, the long-term health effects of steroids, anabolics, and I guess you could put SARMs on the list anyways, anything revolving adding an exogenous hormone into your system, and long-term health effects, because that's one of the biggest questions. So I'm just basically going to let Ben and Trevor talk, and then I'll intervene as usual. So what do you think would be the most risk you need to worry about? I would say heart health would probably be
I
long term.
Long term, I would say heart health and kidney health would be the main two. And the biggest thing I think to worry about to control that and keep it down is monitoring your blood pressure. Making sure that your blood pressure is in range, because when your blood pressure is high, your kidneys have to work harder to filter the blood, and it's also putting stress on your heart. You know, with us lifting heavy weight already, that puts us at risk, a lot of pressure in the heart to begin with. So when you're doing like a heavy bench press or a heavy squat, your blood pressure's through the roof, which causes your heart to grow over time, and it thickens, which causes it to be harder to beat. And now if you do a lot of cardio, like with you being a long distance runner in the past, your heart will grow in an opposite type of way. Well, it'll keep it where it's kind of, I guess, more fragile.
Which wall specifically thickens that you don't want to thicken?
The left ventricle, I believe, is the one that thickens. And that's very common, even just in natural guys that lift really heavy weight, like strongmen, power lifters, and so on. But when you take steroids, it exaggerates that. And that is because, you know, you're lifting heavier weight, you got more power, there's more pressure, more blood pressure, plus a lot of times, you know, you may be holding water or sodium. Your sodium retention could be up, your minerals could be a little off balance, which is going to cause the blood pressure to increase even further. So that's the number one thing I would say to start off would be blood pressure. And then after that, I mean, what do you think, kidneys?
I'd say hematocrit.
And that's another big issue with the blood. Now that's more long term, so if you're on TRT, that's something you got to worry about. I'd say like anywhere from 3 to 6 months at that point, you're going to have some issues. Most people, at least some elevation in hemoglobin, red blood cells, hematocrit. So the hematocrit's like the thickness of the blood. The hemoglobin and hematocrit go hand in hand pretty much. So there's actually a formula they use with the hemoglobin to get the hematocrit. So if your hemoglobin's high, your hematocrit will also be high.
And that's why it's always pushed to donate blood while on cycle.
Exactly, yeah. And certain steroids are going to cause more red blood cell increase than others. I believe it causes the bone marrow to actually kick up production of the red blood cells. And that's pretty much any steroid. But, you know, Anadrol, Equipoise, those are the ones that are known to be more of an increase, more prevalent with those. So, you know, you definitely want to donate if you can, or at least monitor it. Some guys have no issues, but think about this too. Most bodybuilders are bigger guys. They got thicker necks, which means you're more likely to have sleep apnea. I know I have it. And before I treated it with a BiPAP, my blood was thick, and I had to donate. And you know, it's not fun. I don't like to get blood taken anyway. You know, but when you got to donate, it really sucks. Because I mean, I had a full bag. I believe it was a 500 milliliter bag that they took. That's about a pint. Yeah. And you know, you definitely can tell. But afterwards, I felt better. Like, I mean, the next day, I felt almost incredible. A little tired the next day, but a couple days following, I felt better. Now, you can rebound after that. Some guys will rebound, and 3 months later, they're right back to where they were. So they got to do it again. Thankfully, I didn't. I treated the sleep apnea, and I've been pretty good. If I was to run like higher doses of testosterone, like maybe 500-600 or more, then I'm probably going to have to monitor it again.
So what's the most notorious for thickening of the blood, you would say?
I would say the one that most people associate is Equipoise. Is that what you think?
Yeah, probably Anadrol does it more though.
Oh yeah, it just, you're using it for shorter periods, I would say.
Yeah, and that causes kidney cell death whenever your red blood cells are thickened. Just over time, that makes it harder on the kidneys. You combine that with diuretics, that's bad.
That's a recipe of a disaster.
Yeah, because when your blood's thick, your kidneys have to filter that, and it makes it extremely difficult. So long term, that's why a lot of bodybuilders have kidney issues.
Transplants.
Yeah, kidney transplants. A lot of that's from diuretics if it's a sudden thing, but if it's long term, it's just from the high protein diets, the anabolics, the steroids, combination of long term use. Yeah. some of the other issues in your liver health. If you run a lot of oral steroids, that's something you really got to worry about. And even if you don't run oral steroids, just the diet alone, having a high cholesterol, your liver metabolizes the cholesterol as well.
And even like on top of that, all the processed foods with all the toxins on top of anabolics too.
Yeah. And the liver, it can regenerate. It definitely, it's resilient, but we're constantly taxing it. Even when you're on testosterone, it's still going through your liver, and your liver has to process it. And, I've had times where my liver enzymes ran at the higher end of normal, and I know guys that don't run a lot of stuff that have high liver enzymes constantly, and sometimes that could be genetic, but usually it's not good. You want to try to get that under control because your liver is really important to your health. It's a detoxifier.
Yeah, and when your liver's toxic, that can throw your cholesterol and lipids out of whack too.
Exactly. And that's another part of the long-term health with the heart, is it can lead to heart disease and arteriosclerosis, which is a clogging of the arteries. So a big thing with guys that run steroids is your HDL will be low, especially if you're running like DHT-based steroids, non-aromatizable steroids.
And they're basically cholesterol anyways. So
exactly, yeah.
People don't realize that.
Every steroid is based with cholesterol, so when you have low HDL, the HDL is the good cholesterol that kind of allows the bad cholesterol to pass through the arteries instead of sticking. If you're at like single digits, a lot of that is sticking to your arteries. Yeah. And most guys are in single digits. Believe it or not, when you're running a heavy cycle, most guys are pretty low, unless you're doing things to mitigate that. There's things you can do, and we've talked about it before in other videos and stuff, but definitely some things you can do to try to help, at least monitor that.
And then what would you say about long term on the HPTA axis? Like, what's your opinion on people? Because, again, I've heard both sides of the story, so what would you say? Well, in my opinion, it's basically messed up forever, but again, people have provided me evidence otherwise.
Yeah, I think, if once you start, there's really no going back. I mean, you're pushing past what you can do naturally. That should be at least the whole point of, you should be running steroids when you can't go any further naturally. So when you do, you go beyond that. You can't maintain that long term without, having steroids in your system. So, you're never going to have a high enough natural test to maintain that muscle. Now, I guess there's different ways of looking at it. Once the cells are built, they're still maintained, but their size will shrink.
Right.
So, there are different ways of looking at it, but I think if you're young, you should avoid it as long as you can. Get some blood tests. If you're low and you're young and you've been doing it, just training hard, and you really want to pursue it, eventually you want to do that. And as long as you know the risk and you do your research and try to do it as best you can and mitigate the side effects, that's your choice,
Right.
But there is definitely
that is a lifelong commitment.
It is, yeah. And sometimes when you're 18, it's hard to make that decision, because you think you may be ready for it, but what if you meet the woman of your dreams and she wants to have kids? And you may never have kids. You may not want to stick yourself for the rest of your life. It may not seem bad on your first or second cycle, but when you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years and you got scar tissue, it's like pushing a needle through a block of wood. I mean, that sucks, man. I know guys that they can't even hit their shoulders or their legs because there's just so much scar tissue. They're hitting like weird spots like their rear delts or their traps and their lats because they're just all built up with scar tissue. Obviously you can mitigate that too by using smaller gauge needles and so on, but yeah, I think long term you really have to be committed because you're taking a risk and you're going to have some consequences.
At least till the age of 35, because then it all spirals downhill after that.
Exactly.
Anyways.
Even 30, really. If you're really into being healthy and you've been training since you were young, once you hit 30, you're probably going to be maxed out and you're probably going to be heading down. And at that point, TRT, in my opinion, is healthy. I think TRT is a healthy thing as long as it's done properly and monitored correctly. But if you're running hardcore cycles, like some guys do TRT at 500 milligrams a week.
TRT.
And that's what they call TRT.
I'm cruising on Trini and on 500 tests.
Yep, exactly. And, in my opinion, your body adjusts to whatever you take. So if you're taking it long term like that, you're not getting any more benefits than if you were on 250. Depending on how big you are. Some guys, like I can maintain my size. I'm 230, 235 pounds with 200 milligrams of test. No problem. Yeah, it's harder. You don't get as big of a pump. You're not quite as full, but you can maintain. Now, a guy that might be
you're
like
mitigating all the things we just talked about.
Yeah, it's a lot less risk, But I think some guys say test is like the safest, but really I think it's got the most side effects.
Yeah.
Really, it aromatizes. I mean, it converts to DHT, and there's another issue guys really need to think about is the prostate.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys don't think about that because you think it's an old man's thing. But I know guys in their 30s that have a hard time taking a piss, and have a hard time getting erections. It's definitely something to think about. And there's really not a whole lot we can do to prevent that. A lot of the DHT inhibitors or blockers, like finasteride, for example.
The restaurant.
Yeah, they have a lot of side effects.
Right.
Sexual side
Big,
effects. So it's a catch-22 there. And there's not a whole lot we can do. But SARMs are supposed to be safer. They're not supposed to target the prostate.
Well, there's some medical studies showing it reduces the size of the prostate.
Yeah,
I don't know how accurate those are.
Like we said about the RAD, it's supposed to reduce it. But I've had guys that I know that have taken it and had blood work and their PSAs were elevated. So it's like, was it real RAD? Or you don't really know.
I've actually seen people who've gone the opposite and they've gone the prostate and it's helped. So, again.
Another thing, Cialis. You could add Cialis. That's good for BPH, benign prostate hyperplasia. So if you got an enlarged prostate, that's something you could do. It's good for your blood pressure, good for your heart, gives you better pumps. I think that's something that's good, if you do have issues like that.
Yeah, I'd say long term, if you're doing TRT too, is keeping a stable blood level of testosterone and controlling your estradiol.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference in the side effects. What would you say? What would you recommend to do that?
I'd probably do it twice a week. Most guys wouldn't want to do that, but that would be the best to keep your blood levels as stable as possible. Find a good PCP that's going to work with you on your anti-estrogen to be able to keep that in check.
Yeah. If anybody needs help with TRT, we work with doctors locally that could help do it properly for you. If you need any advice, you're more than welcome to contact us. We'll get you set up.
So overall, most of the long-term health effects probably have to do with water retention and blood pressure. So if you're going to be experimenting like this long-term, you definitely don't want to be holding a ton of water because that seems where most of the problems arise.
Yeah.
And obviously keeping it in moderation and not just blasting for 10 years straight and expecting nothing to go wrong.
Exactly.
But I mean...
And cardio, keep up your cardio.
For sure.
And the diet, you can't go crazy eating processed foods and lots of trans fat. The cholesterol is more of a get you in the end type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like you said, the water retention, blood pressure, that's kidney health and heart health. So it targets both of the #1 issues.
Anything else?
Anything coming
on?
I'm trying to think of
another long term.
Some guys worry about hair loss, but I consider that cosmetic, more so than anything.
And that's a myth too. They say it just speeds up the process. It never makes it worse than what it's going to be in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's genetic.
Yeah. Growth hormone, that's another thing, that I think plays a role in your health long term. If you can keep your growth hormone levels going longer, I think that's a good thing. And, that'll help with repairing your cells and damage. It actually, a lot of the guys that I know that use growth hormone in low doses, like replacement, have better blood panels when it comes to cholesterol and so on. So I think it has some positive effects as well, as long as, once again, it's not abused. Right. I think that covers a majority of it.
Alright, so those are some of the long-term side effects of steroids. Again, if you're seeking any more information, I will link tgbsupplements.com social media below. But overall, one thing to take away from it is, again, it's probably going to be a lifelong commitment, and it's not for everyone, and there are a bunch of things to be kept in check. Again, I think a lot of the problems arise from people who are delusional, people who have image issues and want to be a certain size their whole life, and just ignore all the side effects and think nothing bad's going to happen. But if you keep everything in check and you monitor everything, again, I don't think it's that detrimental to your health as long as you don't let anything get out of control, just like alcohol or any other these controlled substances. Alright guys, I'll see you in my next one.